Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to our panel presentation on the Lincoln Park Superfund site. My name is Lisa Stutz, the Museum Director of the Royal Gorge Regional Museum and History Center. As some of you may know, our museum is the local repository of the Cotter collection. We have multiple reports, in fact, a whole vault full of records and studies done by and about the Cotter Corporation and the Lincoln Park Superfund site. It is our responsibility at the museum to ensure these records are preserved and made accessible to everyone. We encourage all of you to explore these reports and become more informed on this topic. We understand that this collection, and especially this topic, can be rather intimidating and at some times generates strong emotions. Our goal, as with everything staff does here at the museum, is to help the public better understand our community by teaching about our collective history, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. We believe at the end of the day, our community benefits from its citizens learning and understanding all of the different aspects of its collective past. It is what helps us all be in the best position for moving this community forward and into the future. It is now 40 years since Cotter was designated as a Superfund site by the Environmental Protection Agency. To help us tell the site's history, we have called upon some experts to talk about what led up to it becoming a Superfund site, the impact the site has had on the community, the formation and history of local citizens groups helping to inform the public about the site, its recent past, and what is currently happening with the site. On our panel today is Emily Tracy, who is the chair of the Community Advisory Group for the Lincoln Park Cotter Superfund site in Canyon City. She has been involved with the Superfund site off and on as a Canyon City resident since the late 1970s. Emily has a bachelor's degree in humanities and a master's degree in public administration with an emphasis in environmental management. She served for 8 years as an elective city council member in Canyon City in the 1980s and early 1990s and was elected again to a 4-year term in November 2021. She also serves as an advisor to Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste. Our next panelist, Carol Dunn, was born in Canyon City and has been a resident of the Lincoln Park area for over 45 years, owning and operating Hilltop Market. Since the mid-1980s, Carol has been involved in community activism. She's been a member of the Lincoln Park Concerned Citizens Group and testified at hearings. In 2002, Carol became a director of the Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste and has served as a co-chair since 2006. She brings her knowledge and experience living near the Superfund site. And our final panelist today is Jerry Fry. She is the founding co-chair of Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste and has served as the director on the board for 21 years. She has testified several times at the state legislature and was involved in helping to pass 4 pieces of legislation that reformed uranium processing in Colorado. She currently serves on the CCAT board as the board treasurer and is the chair of the education and grant committees. She also grew up in Lincoln Park, and her father, Lynn Boughton, was the whistleblower at the Cotter uranium processing mill. Before I turn it over to our panelists, I want to mention that we are recording this presentation, and we will be making this video available to view on our YouTube channel, channel 191, and you can always request a digital copy of the video from our staff. I also ask that you please reserve all questions and comments to the end of the presentation from our panelists, and to please silence your cell phones. Thank you so much, and I will turn it over to Emily.
Thanks, Lisa, and thank you all for being here. Appreciate you taking time out of your Saturday to be here, and we're happy to be here to provide some background information about the Cotter uranium mill site, but also bring us up to date on what some of the issues are now. I do want to, if you haven't seen them yet, there are some handouts in the back of the room on a table near the door. Be sure you pick some of those up. There's at least one of them that I'll refer to, and maybe others will refer to during our presentation. So I wanted to be sure you saw that. I'm going to just say briefly that we're going to go through a number of slides, but probably not spend a lot of time on any one slide. But I wanted to start by just giving a little bit of history of the site for those maybe who aren't familiar with that full history. So that's what we're going to start with. And I'll say that much of these next 10 slides or so is information that came from a Denver Post article a few years ago, where they kind of summarized the history of the Cotter site. And if you're not familiar with the site, let me say what it was. It was started in the late 50s. It was a uranium mill site, which was unusual in several ways. One of the ways it was unusual was it was not located near a uranium mine. For the most part, they were hauling uranium ore, which is just rocks, basically, with uranium in them. And they were hauling those rocks, that ore, in from mines that were 100 miles away or more. But I won't go into all the detail, but apparently the person or the people who started this Cotter Corporation site in the late 50s just liked it here, and they wanted it here. But I often say that where it's located, 2 miles south of town, uphill from a community, uphill from a major river, over a lot of coal mine workings, and not near a mine. It just, in many ways, looking back, we can say it didn't make much sense that they were locating that here. So what's a uranium mill? It's a milling process where they break down the rock and use chemicals to extract the uranium, and the end product at a uranium mill is called yellow cake, and it's literally this yellow powdery form. I won't, again, go into all the details of the process, but that would get, back when the mill was operating, that would get shipped to other parts of the country where they further refine it and enrich it, ultimately to use in fuel rods for power plants, nuclear power plants. So that was the process here. And it's a very, very small fraction of what they pull out of the rock is what the usable uranium is. And so the rest of it was waste material, but still full of radioactivity. And so the rest of that tailings material for a number of years was just dumped on the ground out there. And you can see even from this first slide that they're even in the 60s, and the mill didn't open until, I mean, it opened in about 1958, but even as early as the 60s, they were beginning to discover that there was a problem, that there were cattle in the area who were getting sick because of the molybdenum that was also a byproduct of this process. So for the next 10 slides or so, I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but just kind of touch on some of the pieces of the history of the site. By 1980, so the pollution in the environment was discovered, first discovered because of cows getting sick in the 60s, and then there was more of this in the 70s. By 1980, I'll back up a little bit. In the late 70s, the regulators, the state and federal regulators, decided that a big part of the problem was they'd been dumping this radioactive material on the ground for years. So they required Cotter Corporation to build new impoundments that would be lined with a synthetic material called hypalon, and that would be laid over a clay-like material that they thought would hold in the waste better. And so in the late 70s, those new impoundments, the primary and secondary impoundments, were built. And then you can see from this slide that by 1980, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation was finding that Cotter Corporation was falsifying occupational health reports to the government and repeatedly exposing workers to excessive radioactivity during a time span there that you can see on the slide. And also in 81, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, released an independent report that documented that groundwater problems at the mill site and noted that state inspectors saw tears and damage to the tailing ponds liners. So they knew from the time that they installed those new impoundments that there were problems and tears in those liners that were supposed to hold all the radioactive material in. So then, by '83, those old tailings that had been sitting on the ground were moved into the new impoundments, and Cotter acquired ownership of the land out there. Previously, it had been state land owned by the Colorado Board of Land Commissioners. So going on a little bit in history, in 1984, which is, as we know, 40 years ago, the federal EPA designated Cotter's Canyon City Mill site and the Lincoln Park community as a Superfund site. So it's really, when you think about it, it's kind of stunning to realize that it's been a Superfund site for so long, and yet we still have a very long way to go, and we'll talk more about that, to actually get this site and the neighboring community fully assessed for, do proper environmental testing and then figure out what that cleanup needs to be. And so you think about it, 40 years ago, all that time, for most of those years, or at least 3 decades or so, Cotter was allowed to continue to operate, even though the contamination was not resolved, was not cleaned up, and they continued to operate and create problems for groundwater and for air in the area. So then you kind of ask yourself the question, or some of us do, well, where will we be in 40 years from now? It's been 40 years just to get to this point where we're beginning to do environmental testing that will guide what a cleanup would look like, but is it going to take 40 more years? None of us knows, really. So just moving along, you can see that throughout this, you'll see on this slide and in other slides that I show, that there were many times that Cotter Corporation was found to be in violation of their radioactive materials license. They were fined, they had to pay fines. There was a state lawsuit, and you see in 1988, Cotter and the state reached a settlement calling for Cotter to pay $11 million for cleanup and $4.5 million in legal fees and costs. So those kinds of things, the contamination, the violation of radioactive materials license and state and federal law went on through all of these decades. For the most part, Cotter operated the mill when the market made it worthwhile for them to operate the mill. So it was operating off and on, so people would have jobs there for a while, and then they wouldn't for a while, and that went on for years and years. And then bringing it up to the 2000s, the year 2000, Commonwealth Edison sold Cotter. That was the parent company to Cotter, was Commonwealth Edison. They sold Cotter to General Atomics for $1 million. And again, state health departments citing Cotter for violations, including, and some of these violations were environmental problems, and some of them were problems with employees not being properly protected out there and exceeding the uranium intake limit that they were supposed to have as employees. So you can see 2001, more violations, 2002, more violations. But another really key thing, and these folks might talk a little more about it, in 2002, the nonprofit Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste was founded, and that was to fight the shipment of additional radioactive waste. The Cotter sometimes was processing uranium ore, and sometimes they were just taking waste for disposal or waste for reprocessing and disposal out there. So it really was becoming a dump site for the country and for the world for radioactive waste. And so Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste, again, started in 2002 to fight what was happening at this site. So moving along then into the 2000s up to now, the state kept renewing Cotter's radioactive materials license. It seems like it just didn't matter how many violations there were. The state just kept renewing that. In 2004, a memo was found saying that the plastic liner, which is the Hypalon liner, is not an effective barrier and unusable under Colorado regulations. But did that have an impact? No, not really. That liner is still there, although we should mention that it's far beyond its useful life. And they began finding issues also with the leak detection system, limited effectiveness of the clay liner under the Hypalon, and then the tears that were known about from the time that the impoundments were built. And again, as you can see, more violations with not a lot of penalty for that. Then in 2007, more deficiencies found, requirements for them to do something about it. 2008, Cotter was fined $15,000 by a federal judge, plus another $15,000 for restitution for killing geese and other birds. And problems were brought forward about groundwater contamination at the adjacent golf course, noting that that had been there, that there had been contamination there for some time. More violations in 2009, 2010. I find this very interesting because this is one of many ongoing issues where it says here, in April, the State Health Department's conservative estimate for cleanup costs, and again, this is 14 years ago, conservative estimate for cleanup costs is $43 million. At that point in time, Cotter had only been required to put up a $20 million or $20.8 million bond. So that has been an ongoing issue, and we'll get more into that as we go. But moving along, again, NRC, because Colorado since 1968 has been what's called an agreement state, so that's why the radioactive materials license lies with the state and not with the federal government. They do that by agreement with the federal U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But periodically, the NRC finds problems with how the state is implementing what they're supposed to be doing as an agreement state. Radon testing, Cotter tells the state, or tells the EPA in July of 2010 that they don't want to continue testing radon because the mill wasn't actively operating. And then there's a report that comes out saying that drinking well water may have put some people at risk. So well water, and they're talking about wells in the Lincoln Park area. Nobody's drinking well water on the site, but that contamination over time got into the wells, or many of them in Lincoln Park. And the agency in 2010 noted that there's no formal institutional controls to control the groundwater use in Lincoln Park. So it's important there's just so many of these themes that go on for a very long time, including the fact that there just have not been institutional controls put in place to make sure that groundwater, well water, is not being used either for drinking water or for gardens or anything like that that might lead to radioactive materials being taken up into the environment and into people. 2011, I won't go through all of this, but just note that even though in 2008, 2009, there was this well water use survey conducted, and that's when they decided, on that previous slide you saw where they decided that some people have probably been harmed by using that well water. But it's important to note that there has been no well water use survey done since 2008, 2009. Meanwhile, people move in, they buy homes, they rent, they move out, and there's very little protection for people, and mostly people just don't know what the situation is there when they buy a home or rent a home in that area. In July, let me just move on here. July, Cotter says that the makeshift row of wooden pallets over the sludge, and the sludge is this material that was in the impoundment. They say that the wooden pallets over the sludge that they're using, they go out on these pallets to test the pH levels in the impoundment. They say those pallets are no longer safe, so they tell the state they just don't want to continue testing the pH or anything else in the impoundments. August 11, the state cites Cotter with one violation for a 2010 spill of more than 500 gallons of uranium-contaminated water. Again, you see the theme. There's violations, there's spills, there's problems throughout the operation of that mill. And then moving on, from 2011 up to now, Cotter Corporation did finally, on their own, close down the uranium mill site permanently. And then they began dismantling equipment, buildings, vehicles, other materials there on the site, and began dumping those things into the primary impoundment. There was no public hearing held in the community regarding that, but apparently the regulators were okay with them doing that because they didn't stop them. And then over time, as we come closer to the present day, the Environmental Protection Agency became more involved beginning the process to fully assess the contamination at the site and then ultimately to figure out what the cleanup should be. And then another little note in history was in early 2018, Cotter transferred ownership of the site plus regulatory responsibility to an entity called Colorado Legacy Land, which was not much more than just 3 people who were sort of in the business of figuring out how to clean up contaminated sites and make it worthwhile to them to do that. Cotter paid CLL an unknown amount of money to take over the site in early 2018. So CLL owns the property and operated the site for 5 years with very few accomplishments as far as determining what the testing needed to be and what the cleanup ultimately would be. There was maybe one, you can see from the slide here, maybe one document that CLL produced in 5 years that was actually approved as being acceptable by the regulators. And then in February 2023, CLL walked away. And so since that time, then the EPA kind of moved in and said, well, we're going to take something out of order in this Superfund process, but we have a contractor who can do a risk assessment document, so we'll use our contractor to do that. And meanwhile, the state then was struggling to try to figure out, well, CLL walked away with the license. What do we do? If they're refusing to comply with the license, what do we do? So basically, the State Department of Public Health and Environment has been operating the site. And when I say operating, I mean managing the monitoring at the site, making sure all of the active equipment like the pump back system, making sure that that continues to work, and then having a contractor, and I'm not going to go into it, but a principal person in the contracting company is one of the same people that used to be a principal person with CLL. That's another presentation maybe for another day. But there's just been a lot that has gone on even in just the last couple of years. So this year, just to bring you up to date where we are, we're trying to plod through this very complex regulatory process and trying to make sure that the right documents get done, they get done in a way that meets federal requirements so that we know that the testing that's going to eventually be done will really lead to what we need to know in order to have a cleanup at the site. So it took Cotter Corporation, because under federal law they're still a responsible party, they were brought back onto the site. It took more than half a year for the federal government to get them back on and engaged with the site. But they were brought back in October of 23, started working on what they needed to do next. They went through a process, as you can see from this slide, where in May of this year, the regulators issued a joint letter from the state and the federal government to Cotter outlining the expected time frame for receipt of the next several CERCLA or Superfund required documents. So they gave deadline of July 7th, then the next document was to be done 60 days after that, and then that third document was to be done 60 days after the second document. May 24th, so very soon after this schedule was laid out, Cotter requested a longer timeline for the documents. May 30th, the agency said no. Cotter must adhere to the original timeline, this one that I show in the slide here. So what has happened since then? They did submit the first document on July 8th. There were a lot of comments, hundreds of comments from both agencies and people in the community, such as the Community Advisory Group. So then October 1st, Cotter requested a 60-day extension on getting that document fixed and turned back in. And on October 8th, a letter from the agencies granted a 30-day extension, not 60-day. So then they were facing a November 8th deadline to get that document cleaned up and turned back in. On October 31st, there were 2 Cotter letters, one of them saying they needed 60 more days to clean that document up, and they wanted 60 more days to turn in the next document after that one. So then, for whatever reason, on November 6th, the agencies granted the requested extensions, even though before they had said, no, here's our deadlines, no, we're not giving 60, only 30 days. But on November 6th, they must have seen Christmas coming or something. The agencies granted the requested extensions to January 6th and January 7th. So where we are now is waiting for the first document to be fixed, for the second document to be issued in draft, and then the third one that's supposed to follow after that. Meantime, it's pushed into next year, and we really don't know. We don't know what shape the EPA is going to be in next year or what's going to happen, because we're changing administrations at the federal level, and that certainly could have an impact. We'll just have to wait and see. So this was one of the handouts back there. I just wanted you to be aware that this is something that we asked regulators to put together a few months ago, because we'd had a very high-level timeline, but it really didn't provide enough detail to even understand where you were. So I encourage people to pick this one up if you haven't yet. And basically, you can kind of tell from the slide that we're in the first part of, across the top of this slide, we're in that first section. We are years out from a cleanup. We're in the remedial investigation part or phase of this whole process, and we're early in the remedial investigation. That blue box there that has another blue box around it, that's where we are now. And as you have just heard, we've had some deadlines extended. So we have a long way to go before we even get through remedial investigation. Next, there will be a feasibility study. You can read across the top a proposed plan for cleanup, eventually a decision about what the cleanup plan is going to be, and then actually implementing a cleanup plan. So it's going to take quite some time. I want to show, if I can figure out how to pull it up here real quick. So let me tell you what we have here. This is, you know, I've talked about the site history. I've talked a little bit about the documents, that there is this multiple series of documents that Cotter has to produce now in order to get to a proper environmental assessment and then a cleanup. But another way to look at the passage of time is to look at the contamination plume itself. And on this slide, and I've got about 9 of these I'm going to go through pretty quickly, but this is an overview in that lower kind of left area. That's the Cotter site. And then up above there, you can see kind of a street grid. That's the Lincoln Park area. The red dots are wells, that are their sampling wells, monitoring wells. And this starts in the year 1979. The blue is showing what they believe is the uranium contamination plume at the site and also into the Lincoln Park area. And so I'm just going to go through these years. Basically, what you're going to see is from 1979, and then I'm going to page through. It'll be 1985, 90, 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2016. So I'm just going to page through, and you can see how this is going to change over time. So that's 1985, what the plume looked like. And I should say that what they're measuring in this chart or in this map is uranium that's greater than 0.03 milligrams per liter. So that was the standard they were using to show this map. And so this is 1990. You can see there's still quite a plume extending pretty close to the Arkansas River. 1996, not a lot of change. Maybe more monitoring wells, so they maybe have a little better idea where it all goes. This is the year 2000, still pretty extensive plume. 2004, still showing pretty close to the river there. And you know, they're just kind of estimating where this uranium contamination plume is based on where they have monitoring wells. They're not monitoring hundreds of places, so it's kind of an estimate of where they think it is. By 2008, they were beginning to see a little bit of a decline. You can see a separation there in the plume, that top area, and then the area closer to the site still persisting. This is 2012. This is 2016. And that's the last slide in that example there. I'm going to go back here, and we'll see if we can get back to where we are here. So I wanted you to see just a quick look at where, you know, they're still monitoring that contamination. Oh, good. This is from the 2023 annual report, and this it's a little bit different format, but you can kind of see they're still looking at a contaminated plume there that extends out allegedly to the edge of Lincoln Park, but then there's that circle up near the top of that overview where there's an area of Lincoln Park where the higher uranium levels persist, and we don't know why that is. We hope that someday they'll figure out why that is. So from there, I just want to, I think if we're going to do questions at the end, is that right? And then we'll just hold off. And, or if you have any questions now on, yeah, that's fine. If there's any questions on what I've covered, I'm happy to address that now. Yeah.
Who was Cotter to begin with? The original purchase from the state, who were they?
Yeah, I mean, we have some names. Jerry knows. Hold up here.
So back towards the end of the rush to the Colorado Plateau, 3 men decided that they would open up an operating mill to help with the milling of the uranium that was being brought in. At that time, Cotter was doing its milling for the federal government, for defense. And so there was a guaranteed market, and these 3 men came into the area and started the mill. We do have their names. Dave Marcotte was the manager at the time, but they were just people. They were not a great big huge conglomerate or anything like that. However, they did incorporate in New Mexico, and I think they used a tax ID from, I want to say Union Carbide, but we'd have to vet that and check it again. But it was just men who decided, hey, we've got a guaranteed buyer, and if we start a mill, we could make a small fortune. So that's how it started. And then, just as an aside, the federal government pulled their contract. There were 34 mills in the Colorado Plateau area, and those 34 mills were in production for defense for the federal government. And then I think more than half of those closed down, and the ones that remained included Cotter. And it was at that point that Commonwealth Edison stepped in and bought the mill because they could see the value from an energy perspective. And it was also at that point that Cotter was looking for another way to be viable and was entering the commercial market at that time. So they were making stuff for the energy of the nation rather than for the defense of the nation. Did that answer? Okay. Yes.
Is all of Lincoln Park considered to be in the Superfund site?
Oh, we're going to talk a lot more about that. The short answer is no, but Jerry's going to cover that after Carol does her piece. We're going to go into detail on that. Good question.
Yeah.
Anything else for me? And we're going to flip seats here real quick. And let me close that out. And then should I bring...
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, and then we'll...
Yeah. Okay. I'm getting up. I'm going to go over here. And then I'm going to go back here. And you're going to move. See? Oh, we did that just like a coordinated effort. Like we know what we're doing.
So you can pick your microphone.
Yeah. All right. I probably don't need it because I have a good loud voice, but this is for the recording, so I will speak into the microphone. This is a way, what I'm going to show you is a way that you can get your own information. And it sounds really complicated, but we all go onto this website, especially when we're doing comments for various documents, like we can do it in our sleep. And there's a wealth of information on here. But I just wanted to mention that back in the day when there was only paper, it was difficult, if not impossible, to obtain information from EPA and CDPHE as a citizen. It often entailed a trip to Denver to search through files with little help from the people in the offices. And the cost for a CORA, which is a Colorado records release, which I don't know what that is for sure, or a FOIA, which is on the federal level, was out of the question for our grassroots self-funded groups. And I've often said, if Mr. Lynn Boughton, who was Jerry's dad, and she'll tell you more about him, had the internet back in the day, oh, hey, we might be cleaned up, seriously, because he had records that he had kept from his employment at Cotter, and he'd go find, paper. But I can't even remember what year it was, but there was a CDPHE IT guy named Warren Smith that spearheaded the effort, kind of on our demands, to gather in one place the documents pertaining to the Superfund site and also related to the radioactive materials license activities for the state of Colorado. Game changer. It was like the sun came up and we all went, yeah. Historical documents which had not seen the light of day for years, when the Superfund site were readily available. All documents available for public comment were posted to the website as well. So we had that resource. And then I'm just going to go through a quick little tutorial on how you, in your own house, in your slippers and your jammies, can get to this website and get to this information. So first you search for CDPHE Colorado, like I've got in the search bar, in the Google search bar, or you can use whatever search engine you use, but we're using Google today. And you find Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment Home, and click on that. Okay, come on now, be nice. There we go. And this is what comes up, is their pretty website with all the information on all the stuff that CDPHE does. It's got all kinds of health information, different programs that they're interested in, vital records, by the way. But what we're going to do is search for Cotter. Just put in the word Cotter and hit the search button, and it will come up Cotter Lincoln Park Advisory Group, which that's not where you want to go. You want to go to the second one, which is Colorado Legacy Land, which we would love to change that name, but that's going to take an act of Congress or something. So we click on that, and it comes up with that title, Colorado Legacy Land, Lincoln Park Superfund Site, formerly known as Cotter Uranium Mill. And it will tell you what you're looking at. You can go on to several places here and get all kinds of good information. One of our favorite places to go is background resources, and this has all sorts of really neat information. I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of the things that we look at often is health information, which has a real interesting document, several, but there's ATSDR, which is Agency for, it says right there, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And this is this document right here at the bottom is one that that CCAT worked on to get them to come and take a look at what's in the groundwater, what's in the soils, and give us information as to what we should do about it and how we should live with that in our soils. Oh, shoot. Now, see, I don't know how to do this, but I will, because it goes to default but it won't. See, this is what I do all the time, too. It's like, oh, man, I got to do it over again. But it's very easy. It really is. See, look, how easy it is. And maybe somebody else has got a better way of doing it, but that's the way I keep doing it. Well, I did, and it went way back. But I'll give you a couple more things on the background. Of course, there's historical documents, which really is quite interesting. Maps and images, and reference documents and links. This is really good because it will take you to the remedial or to the radioactive materials license if you're interested in that, in conjunction with who holds it now, which is CLL holds it, but the land, yeah, anyway. And then there's a place here which is acronyms and terms, and I do have some handouts with this information as well, but this will give you an idea of what this is. And these are very site-specific to our site. And then I've got another handout that's like EPA acronyms, which is 3 pages and gives all kinds of information. Okay, Emily, so what am I going to do?
See that arrow there?
This one?
Uh-huh.
No. No, it won't do that because because it's a weird website. Yeah, exactly. But we'll get back to where I want to go, which by doing what I did before, but it's a dance. Just talk amongst yourselves. But there is so much information on here that it's worth looking at it. I do want to get to a place where it shows how you can make comments on, well, and also the CAG information too. So there are documents here that shows documents that are put out by Cotter with responses from CDPHE or EPA on the comment section by year, clear back to 2015. Then on the community advisory part, it gives you upcoming meeting information. And also, if you click on this little part here, and I'm not going to click because then I'll have to go clear back. It shows you past community advisory group agendas, summaries, and supporting documents. So if there's a presentation and you want to go back to that happened during a CAG meeting, it will be on there. And that's a really good place to find out information if you've missed things. Then back to, where do I want to go? I want to go to, will it work this time? Are you sure?
Yeah.
That? Okay.
Yeah, 'cause it's going to take you out.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks, ladies. We have to do this all together. And there's a place on here where you can sign up for email notifications, and that's where we want to go to just give you an indication of how easy it is to get on the email list. So all you do is put in your email, and you don't even have to put your first name or any other information. And you will get, and then you click as to what your interests are, which would be down here toward the bottom. The last 4 would probably be good ones to click on that are, that have association with Lincoln Park. And you will receive emails when things are going on as far as documents coming out, meetings coming up, all kinds of neat things like that. I think, let me see if I had anything else to say. Oh, here's just a suggestion for use. Using either a desktop or a laptop computer is better. Some tablets and phones do not support Adobe or Adobe Reader very well, or Adobe Acrobat. And also, if you want to look at maps, they're teeny tiny on your phone and even on your laptop or on your iPad. So that's a good idea to go ahead and use either a desktop or a laptop computer. And if there's any questions, and it's a pretty intuitive website, it really is. It leads you through, and just digging around in it, you can find some really interesting things. So thanks for coming this afternoon and listening to me, and
I have one question.
Oh, you
for
do?
Could you do a quick search to the CCAT website?
Oh, I can, absolutely,
The
yeah.
CCAT has built a website that hopefully, when you care and you just can't face the twisty-turny maze of passages that is the CDPHE website, you can go to the CCAT website and reach out to us directly and ask us questions.
My typing skills are about as good as mine.
So you can usually search this by typing out Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste,
Which is what I'm
or You can do CCAT, and sometimes it will find it that way. And
It comes up the very first thing.
there, and this is our website. And as you can see, we're in a meeting right now. We do have pop-ups at the website when there are events coming, and that allows you to kind of quickly keep current. Also, if you sign up with us to receive the CCAT news, then you'll get periodic emails from us. Yes?
Are there other people in other areas of the state of Colorado, or is this just unique to?
This is just us, yeah. We've been asked that question before. It's like, oh, you're taking care of the entire state. It's like, no, we've got all we can do right here. And it just, it had to be a name. It's 22 years old and we can't change it now. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Jim Hogan, and I would like to know, you've got this thing drawn out here. What is your plan? Where is the money coming from? Are you gonna cover it all up?
Well, what's interesting is under federal law, unless it gets changed someday, the responsible party or parties have to actually pay for the testing and cleanup. So Cotter Corporation is having to pay for these regulatory costs and ultimately for cleanup. So it will be the company that pays the cost under federal law. State law is different.
Do you think that you're just gonna haul a lot of dirt in there and cover it up, or how do you wanna get rid of it?
I don't, it's a great question. We don't really know. We would love for it all to be gone, but we know, even if we had it all hauled away, you think about hundreds and thousands of truckloads of material. There's tons of waste out there, many tons. And so even though we'd like it to all be gone, we don't know if that's really what they'll do or not. We're years away from figuring out what the plan is going to be because we need to do more testing.
Somewhere on that chart, I think it says something about remedy. And that's the point where they go through all the stuff that they've learned through all the years and choose a remedy. And it may be a choice, a multiple choice, at which time then the community has to be satisfied as well as all the regulations to decide on that final remedy.
So you're depending on the community to decide what to do now?
In part, yes, yeah.
What about Cotter? Cotter's way out of the,
Well, no, they're part of the decision-making as well. But it's got to be, everybody's got to be satisfied under EPA regulations. All the community, the company, their laws, and, it's going to be a combined operation when we get down to that point.
If I could say just a few things too. The Community Advisory Group meets monthly on the third Tuesday of every month from January through November. And so we'll meet again in January. And those of us in the community who are caring deeply about this are able to meet with the EPA and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment every month. The discussion is to help get us through what's called the CERCLA process. The cleanup process is very lengthy, and Emily went into that some in her presentation. But it is so lengthy that it feels oppressive as a citizen living in this community. It's very hard to keep up with it. And since it only takes 8 years for a community to forget, this has been in the remedial investigation piece of this for 12 years. And we have stayed right with it. Those of us here on the panel have stayed right with it to hold the feet to the fire of the EPA and the Department of Health and make sure that they're doing what is in the best interest of our community as far as disclosure, as well as protecting the health and environment of our area. And yes,
there's pipes that go down in the ground. I've seen several of them, you know.
those are
Different parts of the community.
wells.
And I wondered what was on the bottom of those pipes. do they, is it so the water can run in and you can test it, put something down that pipe and test it and see if there's still uranium
That is a
water in there?
beautiful simplification of the complexity of it. Yes, that is what happens. Those are monitoring wells, if I'm understanding what you're describing. Those are like little pipes that stand various places in the community. And those are some of the areas that they go to do the well testing. And the red dots that were on Emily's plume maps,
Yeah.
those are the wells.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. And you had a question?
Do you know if Cotter has the financial means to pay for this?
Okay, a couple of things to understand. Colorado Legacy Land has ownership of the land out there and the radioactive materials handling license for the site. And they are in violation of their license because they aren't keeping up with their regulatory responsibilities. They have disappeared. Cotter is only a player because they're a potentially responsible party. And under EPA CERCLA law, any potentially responsible party can be tapped to get the place cleaned up. Right now, there is a document in place called the AOC SOW, the help.
Administrative order on consent and scope of work.
Okay.
Statement of work or scope of work, yeah.
So that was signed in 2014, before CLL came on the scene. CLL came on the scene in 2018. And so when CLL dropped the keys in the parking lot, our EPA program manager was able to pull Cotter back to the site under the contractual requirements of this AOC SOW. So Cotter is back on the site and fulfilling that one document. And beyond that, at this point, they are not required to do anything else.
However, do we want to go to the however? If Cotter cannot fulfill their financial, if Cotter cannot fulfill their financial obligations, then the Superfund process takes over and the federal government is uses their funds to pay for it. Correct? Okay.
One of the problems with that is that CLL is holding, these are my terms, CLL is holding the license hostage. And the state is having to figure out ways to deal with that and hold CLL accountable. You had a question?
Is there evidence that the contamination is migrating into the Arkansas River?
There is a monitoring protocol right now that is part of the license at Cotter. Now, think of two things. We have the license and we have the Superfund CERCLA process. So those two things are different, and they have to abide by both. And I can't answer your question because I'm not doing the monitoring. But it would look like the plume is still a very persistent problem in Lincoln Park. And groundwater, any water, is always going to go downhill. And
So we don't know if they've done testing?
not recently, but I can tell you some historic documents lay it right out that they even tested water or tested in the bottom of the Pueblo Reservoir back in the 80s, and there were Cotter constituents there. So
And so is it possible to get them interested in this if they know that they're drinking contaminated water? Or,
anybody here from Pueblo?
I mean, is
We do work with some people who are watching this particular industry in the Pueblo area, but this is we're doing the heavy lifting here. This community deserves better than what we've gotten. And so your questions should be posed at a CAG meeting to a regulator. And see if you could get a straight answer there. Any other questions?
Shall we switch? Let's switch. I'll go down. If you just pass me my water, I'll be happy.
Okay, let me see if I can find myself. In the meantime, I'm Jerry Fry. I'm co-chair of Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste with my friend Carol. And I'm also vice chair with Emily on the Community Advisory Group. I have had the fortune of being able to give presentations during the Community Advisory Group. Thank you. So are we up here? Okay. So one of the things that we've been able to do is have a spot on the agenda during the Community Advisory Group meetings, which again happens every month, January through November. So the next Community Advisory Group meeting will be in January, the third Tuesday of the month. And we will probably have yet another presentation that will be given to kind of keep learning about the Superfund site. This is a presentation that I gave at a couple of months ago at the CAG, and it's going to answer some of the questions about the boundary of Lincoln Park. One of the things that is on the table right now is that our school district is preparing to do construction of a brand new gymnasium at the McKinley School. McKinley School is right smack in the middle of Lincoln Park. And so the Community Advisory Group has been in contact with the school district and said, hey, there's a suspicion that back in the 60s when the building was built at that time, that fill material was brought in that was radioactive. And the reason that we hang on to this suspicion is because there have been health impacts in students and in teachers at McKinley School. And it would be nice to know why, or if there's anything we can do about that. It's a slow-moving issue, so just to give a briefing on that, I did contact the superintendent of schools, and they contacted the construction company who came in and did testing where they will be disrupting the soil. So they did not test the soil underneath the school that I was bringing forth my concerns about. And it isn't a matter of us trying to just cause problems. There is a concern there, and we deserve an answer, whether it's contaminated or not. I'm going to foreshorten this a little bit because this audience is somewhat different, and I would like to now jump to the idea of the notifications that get sent out. Do any of you have a well in Lincoln Park? Okay. So this map that's up on the screen right now has kind of a big bulbous boundary around Lincoln Park, and that is the area that the I was going to say the mill operator. Anyway, they're required to give notification to people that live in this bounded area. And that is accomplished by a letter that looks somewhat like this. It is sent. Yeah. Yeah. This notification letter is about 4 pages long, and it has to be sent out annually by certified mail to people who have a permitted well within 1 mile of the groundwater plume that we noticed earlier from the slides earlier. The groundwater contamination plumes in Lincoln Park kind of keep changing, but for the most part, that map that I just showed you is where they're going to be receiving these letters. So at the last CAG meeting, I asked the Department of Health who they had sent, how many letters they had sent out, and apparently 124 went out. No more granular detail on that as to whether they went to property owners, renters, or what. So I'd be curious to hear from people who might be receiving these letters. This notification letter happens because of some of the work that Colorado Citizens Against Toxic Waste did back in the early days, where we were helpful in getting some bills passed at the legislature that revised the Radiation Control Act of Colorado. And one piece of that was that, hey, tell the community. So the notification letter has gone out as of the first part of October, and it apparently goes out the latter part of the year every year. And it's received by those it's sent to as a certified mailing. Let's see. Do any of you know people who have wells? Do you have neighbors? Yeah.
I have a well that I get a notice on, it's on the south end, it's not in the plume area, I'm not sure on that map where it says, but I do get these notices from them.
Okay.
I haven't seen this one yet.
So you get the certified letter from the state saying you're in the Superfund area?
Well, I've been getting them from Insero, from CLL, basically.
Right, right. And now you'll notice that the letter that they sent out this year has Insero's name on it. So Insero is the contractor that the state contracted with to manage the site when CLL disappeared. And there's a whole nother twisty story there, which we won't even go into right now. So just briefly, what I wanted to talk about is the boundaries of the Superfund site. So the site was listed on a NPL National Priority List it was actually listed in 1983 if you look at the top line of that paragraph. But, you know, what's a year after 40 years? Anyway, it described the area as from Grape Creek to Fawn Hollow, everything south of the river. And so initially it was the entirety of Lincoln Park. And those of you who are familiar with the geology of our Lincoln Park area realize that the whole area is kind of a plateau. And that area has been, you know, wonderful loamy ground for growing gardens and orchards, and that truly is its past. But as the years went by and the contamination got into our world, you can see changes in the boundaries of the Superfund site, and they move all over the place. So this image is a map from that 2014 document, the AOC SOW. And because that's the governing document at the site right now, I pulled this image so that we could see what they think the area is. And as you'll notice, the caveat here says boundaries are based on the nature and extent of contamination and are subject to change. So that is within the governing document right now. And the other thing I would like you to take notice of is that the boundaries are indicated like this. I'm tracing it with my little pointer. And what I have traced now is operating unit 1. What I am tracing now is the restricted area, which will never ever be used for anything else. And up here is what is called operating unit 2 of the site. And apologies, I didn't give you bearings. This is the river up here. But when the site was initially listed, it was listed from roughly here off the map, the entirety of Lincoln Park south of the river, all the way over to roughly here, which is near the Willows Lakes area. So that's what the 2014 governing document at the site right now is describing as the boundaries. What is missing off of this site is a discussion of operating unit 3. And operating unit 3 has some very distinct locations named, and we'll see that on other maps. So just a brief discussion here. This is the entirety of Lincoln Park. I'm tracing the river right now. So from the left to the right, everything south of the river. And this area right here is the Raton Ridge to the north of Cotter, and Cotter would be sitting down off of Marsh Slide in this direction. This was back in 1937 when the area was completely in orchards and truck farms, and the DiNardo twins and the Merlino family had competing cider mills. There was so much fruit in Lincoln Park at that time. Let's see. Just a brief showing of this. This is the floodplain map from the county. And again, here's the river up at the top. And the tailings ponds down here are marked. And this is the emergency response document that the county does and tries to keep current. The map I've got here is an old one, but I've superimposed the flood of 1965 over the Lincoln Park area, and you can see that it washed out of the old tailings pond area and followed Sand Creek all the way to the river, and also went through another area and went down Pine Street deep into the Lincoln Park area, roughly toward Sherman Avenue. And then over here on the side, it also drained off this way and towards the Willows Lake area. So this was a huge 100-year flood that was done back in the day. Well, as far as boundaries for Lincoln Park, they're pretty organic in this picture. So this next image that I have is from the remedial investigation done in 1986. What we have here are just drainage areas through the Lincoln Park area. So the river is here. And this is the Chandler Creek drainage area. And then I won't go into a lot of detail here, just suffice it to say that they each have different names. And so back in the 1986 remedial investigation area, the boundaries of Lincoln Park included these drainage areas. Also in the remedial investigation from 1986, there was a study area defined by drawing a set of circles coming off from Cotter, which is roughly down in here. So you can see that here is the river, and all of these circles were considered to be Lincoln Park area, and it kind of went wide over here a little bit, over to the Willow Lakes area, and it kind of went wide over here. Just to get your bearings, this is 9th Street. And then going off this way on Elm, for example. Okay, so other things that helped through the years to define the boundaries of Lincoln Park were further in the remedial investigation from 1986. They defined this area here, which was called the Lincoln Park model. And as you can see, there's a straight line drawn here, which roughly lands where the Raton Ridge is, and right here is where the SCS dam was installed after the flood, and here is where the other SCS dam was installed after the flood. Just by way of indication on this map, Sand Creek isn't clearly indicated, but it roughly goes like so. So you can see that we've got a very distinct boundary here that they are calling Lincoln Park. And then another one was where they decided that they would test certain things, and it too was very rigidly defined. I'm going to kind of skip through this one because this one's a little bit harder to incorporate. However, in 1998, there was a Lincoln Park area public health assessment, and it looked like this, and the large circle was considered to be the study area for Lincoln Park in this map. So you can see that the size of Lincoln Park has changed for various reasons depending on what's being studied. So this is the Lincoln Park study area from the USGS Water Resource Investigations back in 1999. Again, the river is all the way up here. And this is 9th Street here, and it goes off like this. I hope I've got that right because I can't quite see it. But you can see the Cotter uranium mill area is down here. The impoundment is here. And the golf course is here, the old golf course. So another boundary for Lincoln Park. This is that area in a different view. But the next slide that I want to talk about is back in the day in 2002, the EPA decided that they would clean up the Sand Creek drainage area. Again, I'm tracing it here. And the river, again, is up here kind of off to the side. Now remember, the fingers of the flood went down Sand Creek, and then from over here straight up Pine, and all the way over here on that third finger. Okay, so this area was the area that they decided needed to be cleaned up. And it took 6 years from 1993 to 1999 to clean this up. And all that material was excavated and hauled up to Cotter. There's a lot of detail to this story that I could tell, but what I want to bring your attention to here is the fact that this boundary was drawn by the EPA as a convenience for the project of cleaning up Sand Creek. And this boundary, sadly, has stuck as the reference for the entirety of the Lincoln Park Superfund site. So you can see that wells that are over here that we know are contaminated are not even included in what is now called Operating Unit 2. So this sort of wedgy appearance is Operating Unit 2. And when you put it on this map, you can see Operating Unit 2 is here, and that is not the entirety of Lincoln Park. And worse than that, McKinley School sits right here. So it isn't stepping through the remedial investigation with all of the other things that are being looked at about the site. Now, this map does show the other operable units that are identified in Operable Unit 3. And that would be the orange-colored boundary sites here. Team Track, which was the dump pocket for the railroad when they were hauling in ore and when they were hauling in the Manhattan Project. And the railroad did not go all the way up to Cotter at that point, so they had to transfer the material from the trains to the trucks and then truck it on up to the site. The other one is Nonak, which is a mine site area, near the mine site area. And for those of you who don't know, Nonak is canyon spelled backwards. Up here at the Santa Fe Depot, all of the trains that came through the Santa Fe Depot. And so that location had to be cleaned up as well, and it is still listed on Operating Unit 3. And then all the way up here is where the Berta truck yard was, and that's off of McKenzie and the highway up there in kind of the vicinity of Home Depot. So those are the operable units, and we talk about it that way because that's a way for us to work through all of the remedial investigation. But my point is that the entirety of Lincoln Park has historically been involved in the Superfund site. And just because one area was cordoned off back in 2000, we are now shrinking Lincoln Park. And that doesn't serve us because we cannot get McKinley School involved in the remedial investigation in the same way. Neither can we get the rec district, which takes their water from a well that comes from underneath Lincoln Park. They don't have city water there. So these sites, or any sites of those of us who live here in the area that are of concern to us, we need a way to get these back into the program and hopefully addressed. Again, this is a depiction of the plume. This also happens to be back on the back wall in the museum exhibit. And this was 2007, the uranium plume, which you can see has a very stubborn little area right smack in the middle of Lincoln Park. And please remember that McKinley School is right about there. And this is just a depiction of the area we're talking about, the Superfund site. And this is the restricted area, and this blue line indicates the Dakota aquifer that sweeps all the way into the middle of the United States. So, any questions? Comments?
I want to add a little thing if I can.
Yeah.
We sometimes feel like we're in this circular thing here where we're told that there will be extensive testing And that's what these documents that Cotter has to produce and get approved, that's what they are going to be laying out, is where are we going to do testing. And we're told that operable Unit 3 can expand. Right now, it's just certain individual sites. We're told that it can be expanded if contamination is found in other areas. But we have not yet figured out how do we make sure that they test some of these other areas. And we're just not quite there yet. Now it's been bumped into 2025, so that, you know, and before we'll even know on the risk assessment side of things, which is before they do what's called nature and extent testing. So we're just not quite there yet to know if they're truly going to do enough testing around our community so that maybe they'll find, or maybe they won't find, other contaminated areas that then would be moved into or be qualified as being part of the Superfund site. So we're that early that we still don't know yet if it's going to be proper.
And we actually need the community's help to say, hey, we need this to be added to the process. Whenever we bring this up at the community advisory group meetings, they will say, well, sure, we'll put it in as soon as we know if it's got a problem. Well, if that isn't a chicken and egg story, because if you don't go test, how are you going to know? And that's their excuse for not adding it in. So if the community is concerned about certain areas, then we need your help to make that clear to the regulators. Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
In regards to using the railroad and bringing in and bringing out some of the rock and ore, is that in outlier 1, 2, or 3? The railroad, like the Royal Gorge train area?
Okay. That's part of the question because, for example, in this map, then the answer, I'm not sure I can see it, is the depot, pardon me. I can't, it's a little too small for me to see, but this is the area of notification map, and this other area shows that the railroad in part is in operating unit 1, and then it skirts, and so the remainder of it is in operating unit 3, but the only identified locations that they are including and giving a hoot about are those there and the one up here. Does that answer your question?
So it's, I guess, they're not testing that area then?
They in the past have done testing and cleanup at the Santa Fe Depot. I think, if I remember right, and you all can see if I do, I think that there will be more testing in that area, but we're just not to that part of the process yet, believe it or not.
Well, if I could just add something, this has been one of my concerns, because that railroad crosses the Arkansas at Black Bridge and comes down through the area across Griffin Avenue, all along where Zerby's Auto is and the Habitat store. There's that railroad track, and there are homes that are like 20 feet away from it. Yeah. So I've been pushing to see if there could be some testing done where that railroad track goes through residential areas. That makes sense to me. So we're working on it. Does that help answer your question? Yes. Okay, great.
And please remember, it isn't just us. I mean, we're just volunteers. So if you have an area of concern, come to a community advisory group meeting and voice it right there to the regulators and say, what is the protocol to get this listed into operating unit 3 so that it can be tested the way it should be? More questions?
So when you're talking about pollution, are we talking the groundwater, the soil, both?
Yeah, the short answer is both, because materials that were hauled in by train, could have spilled. That would have contaminated the soil. The plume that we have been talking about as groundwater. So this is the groundwater situation right now. And we don't even have a way to map the air because it can just blow. And there's some really nice pictures that actually Emily took back in the 80s of how badly it blew then. And now we don't even have any tachifers or any kind of dust suppressants at the site. And that would be addressing dust. But the tailings impoundments are still emitting radon. And radon is a radioactive gas. And that was one that I think Emily had mentioned in her presentation, that Cotter just went to the regulators and said, we're not doing this anymore. And so nobody has been monitoring radon from the site. Yes?
I went to a class over the summer and I wrote Brittany Patterson, is it, representative, in regards to Cotter. And her response was in regards to Rocky Flats. So it's like, I'm not sure if she responded or one of her aides, but it had nothing to do with Cotter, it was Rocky Flats. Rocky Flats was cleaned up years ago. I remember living in a different area. Why? Well, we know they keep passing the buck and not cleaning, but I guess what's the difference between cleaning up Rocky Flats in our area?
Oh, that's all.
Why did we get precedent when we did not?
I'll say a couple things, and then there's probably other comments too. Interestingly, we are in communication right now with a documentary film producer who has produced a film about the Rocky Flats situation called Half-Life of Memory. We're hoping to show that in Canyon City sometime soon. We just haven't put together the logistics on it. There are many parallels, but there are also some differences because they were dealing with even more dangerous radioactive materials there, primarily plutonium and so forth. And the cleanup there, I mean, I don't know the whole story other than they seem to get right to it and clean it up, although we know that there's highly radioactive materials just a few feet below the surface. And there's been new residential building that's encroaching on the site that many people believe should not have been allowed to happen. So it's, there's many parallels there, and there's also some differences. I would just say that when you talk about Rocky Flats being cleaned up, there are many folks who don't believe it was very thoroughly cleaned up. And now they've made it into a wildlife refuge with trails, and there are a number of folks that just say that it should not be accessible to people at all.
Yeah.
Do you know why the House of Representative Brittany Peterson would it reference Rocky Flats to me when I wrote about Cotter?
I can't answer that because we have communicated with her directly and with her office and her staff, and they know a little bit about this site, so I just have no idea why that would have happened. That's not good to hear.
No, that's not good to hear. And I know that we're bumping up on our time right now. But I would say Brittany Pedersen has got an office here in Canyon City. And we can get together after this presentation and give you contact so that you can talk with her office here and ask them that question and draw the attention to the fact that answer my question, not something else. Yeah, that's, yes.
Do you have like a list of the people we should contact and bug?
So right here and on the back table. And please understand that I'm going to have to print all these again in January. So take them and use them up now. But this is all your elected officials. Write to them. Because Colorado is an agreement state, we need to have the ear of our senators and representative here in Colorado. They need to take an active piece here at the state level as well as at the federal level. And squeak that wheel anytime you can. Write a letter, because this is still here and it's going to be here for eons. Well after we're gone. So pick up one of these from the back table. Also on the back table, please find this QR codes to go is a way for you to kind of visit the information that's in the museum exhibit just by opening up your phone and taking a picture and connecting directly with some of the things that are on display here. Also, pick up this, which is what you should know when your neighbor is a radioactive Superfund site. So this is kind of a little briefing about things that you will find helpful, and there's also contact information on the back. Please know that you can go to coloradocitizensagainsttoxicwaste.org at any time and reach us. Okay? I thank you so much for your time. Lisa, thank you.
One final note, we want to encourage everybody to take a look at our display here. It will be up for another couple weeks, but we will have this information readily available for years to come at our museum, and of course, we are the local repository for the Cotter records. So thank you again. Thank you, panelists.